YouTube, I've missed ya. How are ya? Zachary Fenell, author of Off Balance. Man, am I excited. You might be asking, why am I excited? I'm excited because, man, our relationship as viewer and video maker, it's going to grow this year. Because my New Year's resolution, one of my New Year's resolutions, 2013 New Year's resolution, is to really do a lot more with my YouTube channel. And that's going to start today. And I'm going to be, with this video, which I'm going to say there's going to be subsequent videos after videos, a couple a month, hopefully, where I just talk about different issues, whether it's related to my book, or Off Balance once more, or related to my book, or disabilities, or other writing projects. Who knows? There might be a few vlogs in here once baseball season starts about the Cleveland Indians. Go Tribe. Nick Swisher. Terry Francona. Anyways, back to topic at hand. Today, I picked a topic which is kind of, I feel, is when you come and you talk about my book, Off Balance, and what it is, and why someone should read it. I think an important question to ask, and a fair question to ask, is why write a teenage memoir in the first place? I think the thought process in asking that question, why write a teenage memoir in the first place, is really just, in a fellow author of mine, Neil Matheson. He is the author of, Canadian author. His book is Daddy Bent Legs. He also has cerebral palsy. And last summer he did an interview on Soapbox Radio, just talking about, and during the process he was talking about writing his book. Neil's 40-something years old now, and he published his book a couple years ago while he was in his 40s. But I thought it was really interesting. He was talking to the host of the show. He mentioned that, hey, I actually wrote my first draft when I was 22. And he mentions that, it's kind of a, in his words, a silly prospect to, at 22 years old to write a memoir or an autobiography. And that's definitely fair to say on the surface, because it's like, alright, you have so much life ahead of you. Why, what do you really have to offer the world in a book? Neil even, in jokingly manner, even, calls it, almost like it's pompous to write a book at 22, thinking that it has some value to it. And he said, those, it's something that, so he wrote that initial draft, and then he waited another 20 years. I obviously didn't. I Off Balance, my initial copy was done when I was 22. But it wasn't published on the Kindle Nook until I was 24, because I really, a lot of the fairness and the question of, what do you have to offer the world was there in the feedback I got on my initial draft of Off Balance. And that's where I kind of changed up my focus and really emphasized and focused on making this a teen memoir. And which is where we lie. And I think as a teen memoir, it's something focused mainly towards teenagers, that you do have a lot to offer. Because why do we say, oh, it's, you're just so young, what do you have to offer? What insights can you give that are going to be beneficial? And the reason that kind of disdain or that kind of questioning comes up is simply because a lot of the problems when you're so young, a lot of your issues when you're a teenager and early 20s, a lot of things, ultimately in the spectrum of life, they're small. But I'm going to assert this and say, small doesn't mean they're not significant. In fact, I will argue and say they are very significant. The teenage years are very formidable ones. And those small things can do wonders into who you eventually develop into as a person. And I think, obviously, autobiographies, biographies, memoirs, the traditional ones, they do relate. In the early chapters, they talk about the person, and they talk about the person as a teen, and a current teen might be able to relate to something in those early chapters, but they aren't given the opportunity, because the book, and justifiably so, is then focused on what that person has done in their adult life a lot of times, that they don't really get to in-depth relate to something in what they connected to. And I decided, in off balance, I'm like, when I write, like, I want to be able to connect on that in-depth level. And why? It's just because it's so important. Those teenage years are so formidable. So those things may seem small, but they really have a large influence on who you become as a person. In high school, I was very shy, as my book demonstrates and everything. I was really shy. And then when I graduated, I just kind of realized exactly how shy I was. And I did like a 180, and I became very much outgoing, because I just looked at my first 18 years of my life. I'm like, being shy is just not worth it. You gotta assert yourself, you gotta put yourself out there, and you gotta live. And so that experience made me who I am today, and outgoing. And being outgoing is so important to me as an author and as a writer, because I have to be out there. As a freelancer, I have to be out there hunting down new gigs. As an author, I have to be out there to promote my book. I'm not going to sell books if I don't inquire to get the word out about my book. So while it was something so small about how I was just always scared as a teenager of just being so self-conscious, and my self-consciousness seemed so small, ultimately as made me outgoing, and which is an important aspect to my adult life now, and professionally. And so again, so that just demonstrates how formidable those teenage years can be, and why I'm so big on providing that in-depth ability. That ability to relate on an in-depth level. Especially, I think, talking about disability specifically, for a student with a disability, reading my book might be able to help them connect and learn from my mistakes. And, it let them enjoy their life as a teen more than they would have if they hadn't read my book. I think too, what really excites me too is that maybe someone who's an able-bodied teen, at the recommendation of a parent or a classmate, or also a parent, a classmate, a teacher, picks up Off Balance and reads it. And what really excites me is, teenagers, teenagers tend to be really a lot of focus on what's going on around them. So they might have a student with they might have a classmate who's in a wheelchair, or who's legally blind, or uses walking device like a walker or a cane, and they just don't know this. They just identify that student. They don't really know. Let's say their name is Chad. They don't know Chad as Chad. They know Chad as the student who uses the wheelchair. Well, they read my book and they get to see, oh, wait a minute, Zach here has a lot of the same desires and interests as I do, I do. So, there is more to it's just because your disability doesn't mean you're not a person with, you had the same urges as everyone else. And that might help them recognize Chad as their their classmate Chad, as an individual, as an equal, on someone on their level, rather than somebody who is, rather than identifying him as the wheelchair user. And ultimately, I mean, that's what writing my book, that's what it's all about. What excites me is the possibilities of what reading it, the influence I can have on someone's life. Because to me, I'm like, how much more gratifying can it be than having a significant influence on someone's life and helping them change a perspective, or change their perspective, open up their eyes on something. I mean, that is just thrilling. And so that's what I really hope I do as a writer, in both Off Balance and articles I write for across the web, and just future books I'm going to write. It's what excites me about being an author. And that is pretty much it. That wraps it up. So do a quick summary, why write a teenage memoir? Because those teen years are so formidable, and while a lot of the stuff that happens when you're a teen is small, ultimately that small stuff is going to have a major influence, and can have a major influence, on how you develop as an adult and go forth in life. Thank you for tuning in. If you would, as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm going to be doing more YouTube videos, so if you have suggestions, feel free to leave a comment below, or get in touch with me on social media. I always love feedback. Take care, YouTube. In the words of Ron Burgundy, stay classy.